I sat there with a fork in my hand and a bowl of cat food in front of me, while my niece laughed like it was the punchline of a joke I'd been too stupid to see coming. After raising her, after selling my house to send her to college, after giving her every piece of my future so she could build hers, she fed me pet food in front of her friends and called it nostalgic. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I went home, found a box marked Old Deeds, and realized something that turned my stomach cold. They built their mansion on land I never signed over. They thought they fed me shame, but I still owned the ground beneath their feet. And now, I was going to make them choke on it. Before we start the story, tell me where you're tuning in from, and don't forget to subscribe. The silver lid came off with a flourish, and that's when the barking started. Their golden retriever, Jasper, let out a sharp, confused growl from across the room. Something in the air made him restless. I could smell it too, a pungent metallic scent rising from the bowl in front of me. It wasn't like anything else on the table. Everyone else had steak, thick, pink-centered cuts, sizzling in garlic butter with grilled asparagus on the side. But my plate held something grayish-brown, soft, almost gelatinous. Amanda leaned in, her eyes too bright. "We had a special dish prepared for you, Aunt Ellie," she said sweetly. Her husband Brent chuckled beside her, already lifting his wineglass. "It's a delicacy. Might be fancy feast. You know, for someone with refined taste." A burst of laughter rippled down the table. For a few seconds, I didn't understand. I just stared down at the bowl, my stomach growling from skipping lunch to save space for this dinner. The first invitation I'd received from Amanda in over a year. I'd made my mother's famous peach pie, spent the afternoon curling my thinning hair, pressing my best blouse. The smell coming from my dish was wrong. Bitter, like liver left out too long, with the wet scent of metal. I saw it then, the faint label on the side of the ceramic dish. It was meant to look like fine china, but if you looked closely, very closely, it read, "Gourmet Pet Collection." That's when I knew. Across the table, a woman I didn't recognize, maybe one of Brent's colleagues, held up her phone and whispered, "Oh my God, this is going to go viral." Amanda threw her head back and laughed, loud and unfiltered. Brent added, "Come on, it's a joke. Lighten up." I looked around the table. 10 people, all dressed in cocktail attire, all laughing. The air buzzed with cruelty disguised as humor, and I sat right there, in front of everyone, with a spoon in my hand and a bowl of cat food in front of me. My mouth went dry. I didn't say a word. I didn't cry. I didn't let my face change. Instead, I set the spoon down, quietly, carefully, and dabbed the corners of my mouth with the linen napkin. My hands shook just a little, enough that I kept them low, beneath the table. I didn't trust myself to speak. "Where are you going?" Amanda asked, her voice half laughing, half annoyed. "It was just a bit of fun." "I need some air," I said softly. I pushed my chair back and stood, smoothing my skirt with both palms. The room spun slightly. My chest felt hollow. The scent of seared steak was suddenly overwhelming. It filled my nose like a taunt. They had eaten like kings while feeding me like a stray. And still, I said nothing. My heels clicked against the hardwood floor. I passed the sideboard, where my peach pie sat untouched beneath plastic wrap. Halfway to the door, Brent called out, "Don't forget your doggy bag." The table erupted in laughter again. I didn't look back. Outside, the air was thick and damp. The porch light buzzed overhead. I could hear the faint clatter of forks behind the window, muffled by laughter that no longer reached me. The sound didn't hurt as much as it should have. Not anymore. Because somewhere deep beneath the shame, something else stirred. Not anger. Not yet. but clarity. They thought I'd come for their food. They didn't realize what I still had. And I was just starting to remember. The air in my apartment was cold when I got home that night, even though I hadn't touched the thermostat. It wasn't the kind of cold you feel on your skin. It was the kind that sinks into your chest and settles there. I peeled off my damp blouse, folded it carefully across the back of the chair, and stood in silence as the refrigerator hummed in the corner. I didn't cry. That surprised me. I just stood there in the soft buzz of my tiny kitchen, remembering all the ways I'd stretched myself for Amanda, and how tightly she'd pulled the string around my throat. My apartment isn't much. 2 rooms, a sagging sofa that used to be beige, the kind of place you only notice because of what it lacks. No art on the walls, no dining set, just a thrift store coffee table and a few picture frames from better times. It smells like lemon cleaner and old paperbacks. Quiet. Safe. It wasn't always like this. There was a time I owned a full home, 2 stories, wraparound porch, hardwood floors that creaked under bare feet. My sister and I inherited it from our parents. When she died in that crash, Amanda was only 6. I still remember the day I picked her up from the hospital. She had a strawberry jam stain on her sleeve and wouldn't stop asking when her mommy was coming back. She never really stopped asking. For the next decade, I raised Amanda the best I could. I worked the front desk at the local clinic during the day and stocked grocery shelves at night. Some weeks, I'd skip my own bills just to pay for her piano lessons or field trip money. And when she got into that fancy prep school upstate, I cashed out the small inheritance my mother left me. Every last penny. The school uniforms alone were more than a month's rent. But I did it. Without complaint. Without hesitation. I sold the house when she turned 18. She wanted to go to college in California. Said she needed a clean break from this town. She cried when I told her we couldn't afford it. So I signed the papers the next week. She never asked where the money came from. I used to think that was love. Now, I wonder if it was just guilt. After she moved out, things faded. Calls became texts. Texts turned into silence. She married Brent 4 years ago, and I haven't stepped foot in their home until tonight. They never visited me here. Said it was too far out. It's a 12-minute drive. The last time Amanda saw this place, she wrinkled her nose like it smelled of poverty. She didn't say it, but I felt it in how she avoided touching the furniture, how she kept her coat on, how she left after 11 minutes. That was 14 months ago. Tonight, she invited me to dinner after all that time. I thought maybe she remembered, maybe something in her cracked. Instead, she served me cat food. I walked to the bookshelf, a rickety thing I've had since I was 21, and pulled down an old photo album. The cover's spine is peeling, held together with duct tape. Inside, pictures of Amanda when she was still mine. Her in her 5th grade recital dress, crooked bangs and missing teeth. Her 6th birthday. The cake was lopsided, but she didn't care. A note she wrote me after her first sleepover. Thank you for being my everything. My fingers hovered over that photo. And that's when I felt it. Not a memory, not nostalgia. A pull. Like something tightening behind my ribs. I flipped to the last page. There was a picture of the old house, the porch, the flower beds I planted by hand, a note tucked behind the frame. I hadn't touched it in years. I slid it out and saw my name in fading ink on an old folded document. The weight in my chest shifted. Not grief. Something else. Something older. Something awake. The phone rang at 9:14 p.m. on a Wednesday. I was halfway through folding laundry, nothing glamorous, just socks and a towel with a hole in it, when I heard the buzz. Unknown number. I let it ring twice before picking up. Hi, Aunt Ellie? Her voice was soft, familiar, laced with something I couldn't name. Amanda? I said, blinking, heart thudding out of rhythm. It had been over a year since I'd heard her voice without it being attached to a group holiday text. Merry Christmas. Hope everyone's well. She hesitated. Yeah, it's me. I was hoping. You might want to come to dinner Friday night? I sat down on the edge of the couch, towel forgotten in my lap. Dinner? I know it's been a while. Brent and I were talking, and we realized we've been distant. We just want to reconnect. My mouth felt dry. Reconnect? She laughed a little. God, I knew this would sound weird. But yes, I miss you. We miss you. And it's just dinner. Like old times. You'll come? I should have asked why now. I should have asked what changed. But her voice sounded almost warm. And even when you've been starved long enough, the smallest crumb feels like a feast. I'll be there, I said, too quickly. The next day, I walked into the thrift store and found a soft lilac blouse with pearl buttons. It still had the original tag on it. I spent more than I should have, but I didn't care. I hadn't had a reason to dress up in months. I came home and pulled out my old recipe box, the one with the faded index cards and my mother's handwriting in blue ink. I chose the peach pie. Amanda used to love it. She'd beg for seconds, then sneak a slice for breakfast the next morning. I peeled the peaches carefully, sliced the lattice crust like I was performing surgery. My hands ached from the cold dough, but it felt good, almost like purpose. Friday morning, my neighbor Charlene leaned over the balcony as I stepped outside. You look nice, she said, then squinted. Where you headed all dolled up? Dinner with my niece, I said, holding the pie tin steady. Charlene's smile faltered. Amanda? The one who hasn't called you since? I nodded. She clicked her tongue. Be careful, hun. People don't come back after silence unless they're bored, guilty, or want something. I tried to laugh it off. She just wants to reconnect. People who want to reconnect don't wait a whole damn year. Still, I smiled, waved, and started walking. The air was brisk. My blouse fluttered under my cardigan as I passed the dog park, then the bookstore that had closed last winter. Everything felt both familiar and far away. Like a town I used to know, but hadn't really belonged to in years. Amanda's neighborhood was spotless. Sidewalks edged, lawns trimmed with military precision. Even the trees seemed to grow straighter there. I slowed when I reached their house. It was bigger than I remembered. White stone columns, fresh red flowers in perfect clay pots. There was music playing inside, something jazzy, something expensive. My fingers tightened around the pie tin. I raised my hand to knock, but the door opened before I made contact. Amanda stood there, smiling too wide. There she is! I opened my mouth to greet her, and then I noticed it. The faint red glow from the hallway behind her. A blinking light. A phone, propped up on the hallway shelf, its camera facing me directly. I froze. Come in, she said quickly. Everyone's waiting. From the moment I stepped inside, I knew I didn't belong. The house was pristine, the kind of clean that didn't feel lived in, just curated. Every surface gleamed under soft pendant lighting. There wasn't a single fingerprint on the glass stair railing or scuff mark on the marble floor. I caught the faint scent of fresh roses, overpowered by something artificial. Citrus cleaner, or maybe a plug-in. It hit me in the back of the throat, like the kind of fragrance meant to impress strangers, not welcome family. Amanda took the pie tin from my hands before I could even offer it. Peach? That's adorable, she said, flashing a tight smile. We've gone mostly gluten-free, but it'll be nostalgic. I opened my mouth to respond, but she was already walking toward the kitchen island, where two caterers in black aprons were arranging plates with tweezers. I stood there alone, cardigan clutched at my elbows, trying not to fidget. My shoes felt too loud for the polished floors. My blouse, the soft lilac one I'd bought just for tonight, suddenly felt too cheap. I caught my reflection in the hall mirror. My hair too short, lipstick faded, skin a little more tired than I remembered this morning. Laughter drifted from the dining room. I followed it, past tall vases and abstract art that probably cost more than my monthly rent. The dining room opened like a magazine spread. Glass table, 12 velvet chairs, a chandelier that looked like falling crystals. 11 people were already seated. Strangers, glossy hair, glossy teeth, men in slim-fit suits, women in silk. They all turned when I walked in, and smiled like I was an exhibit in a museum no one asked for. "Aunt Ellie," Brent called, standing up theatrically. "There she is." He crossed the room with mock enthusiasm and kissed the air beside my cheek. "You clean up nice," he said, eyes dragging over my cardigan. "Vintage look. Very downtown." I gave a polite nod and stepped forward. No one moved to make space. Amanda returned just in time to gesture toward the seat at the far end of the table, the one directly beneath a downlight, a little apart from the rest. "Sit here," she said. "You'll have the best view of everyone." I sat down, placing my napkin gently on my lap. The fabric was stiff, starched to perfection. Conversations resumed. Not to me, but around me. Something about interest rates, a recent ski trip, the new Tesla model. I didn't speak, but I listened. I always listen. That's how you learn who people really are. Across from me, a woman in a red dress leaned into the man beside her and whispered something behind her hand. He chuckled. Amanda noticed. "So, brave," she said suddenly, raising her wineglass. "To wear that color, Aunt Ellie. Lilac isn't easy at our age, is it?" I blinked. Brent snorted into his drink. "Charity chic." "It's making a comeback." I could feel the heat creeping up my neck. But I smiled. Barely. "I'm just glad it still fits," I said, sipping my water. My glass was the only one without wine. The server came by, refilling glasses. He poured for the others from a sleek green bottle, then passed me entirely. The next course arrived, seared scallops over something with truffle oil, the smell thick and musky. I watched as plates were set with surgical precision. But when it came to me, Brent lifted a silver lid himself, grinning. "We've got a surprise dish, just for Aunt Ellie," he said. Amanda's eyes sparkled. "Hope you're feeling adventurous." The lid lifted with a faint clink, like the start of a magic trick. Only the trick was on me. The smell hit first. Not immediately. It snuck in, a second too late. Damp, meaty, metallic. Like rusted pennies soaked in fat. It clung to the back of my throat and made my stomach tighten. My hand, still politely resting on the napkin in my lap, twitched just slightly. The bowl sat in front of me, low and wide, a mound of unidentifiable paste sitting right in the center. It glistened under the chandelier, grayish-brown, with the texture of something wet and processed. Amanda leaned forward, eyes wide with faux excitement. "It's duck pâté," she said, voice rising as if she were offering me caviar. "Imported. A little strong, but we thought you'd appreciate something refined." My stomach clenched tighter. From the other end of the table, Brent smirked. "Organic. Locally sourced," he added. "From aisle 7, next to the meow mix." Laughter exploded around the table. I froze. No one else had a dish like mine. The others had been served seared scallops on beds of risotto, garnished plates, real food. Mine was a joke, a cruel, calculated joke, presented with silverware and fake sincerity. Someone's phone camera glinted under the chandelier. I could feel the lens aimed right at me, the slow zoom of digital cruelty. "Come on," Amanda said, motioning toward my spoon. Try it. You always say not to knock something until you taste it. I looked up. Her face gleamed with delight. Not warmth, not love, delight. Like a child watching a bug squirm under a magnifying glass. I didn't move. The silence around the table started to stretch. Even the laughter slowed into awkward titters. One of the women to my left, the one with the French manicure and dripping diamond earrings, leaned in toward her date and whispered, "Is she actually going to eat it?" The spoon felt heavy in my hand. I hadn't even noticed I'd picked it up. Brent's voice rang out too loud now. "Oh, lighten up, Ellie. It's just a bit of fun. God, no wonder you live alone." A fresh wave of laughter. That was the moment. Not the bowl. Not the camera. Not the smell. That. The offhanded cruelty in his tone. The ease with which he said it. Like loneliness was something I'd earned. Something I deserved. I placed the spoon back down. Not with force. Not dramatically. Just enough for it to make a soft clink against the edge of the bowl. Then I lifted my eyes and looked straight at Amanda. She was still smiling, phone in hand, recording. We locked eyes. For a long second, neither of us spoke. I saw it flicker, something behind her eyes, something like discomfort. Not guilt, but recognition. She'd pushed too far, and I hadn't cracked. I stood slowly, smoothed my skirt and adjusted my cardigan. "Excuse me," I said quietly. No one tried to stop me. No one called after me. They were too busy whispering, too busy trying to decide if the joke had landed or if it had gone sideways. I walked past the hallway mirror again, caught my reflection. The same blouse, same pearls, same shoes, but something in my eyes had shifted. The sadness was still there, but beneath it, something else had started to rise. Resolve. I passed the kitchen where my peach pie still sat on the counter, untouched and forgotten. I didn't take it with me. The air outside was colder now. The moon hung low, the kind of pale you only notice when you're walking alone. But I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. Not this time. They thought they'd made me small. But they'd only made me sharp. By the time I reached the end of Amanda's driveway, the drizzle had started. Thin, cold needles of water pricked the top of my head, soaking through my blouse in seconds. I didn't run. I didn't even cover my head. Let it fall, I thought. Let it wash this night off of me. The streetlights flickered in the wet dark, their glow distorted through raindrops clinging to my lashes. Each step felt heavier than the last, like I was dragging the weight of 1,000 unspoken things behind me. And still, I didn't cry. That surprised me again. The sidewalk curved past the bakery that had closed down last spring, past the rusted bus stop where Amanda once sat waiting for school pickups, lunchbox dangling from her backpack. I remembered the way she used to run toward me, full speed, messy hair, calling Aunt Eli, like she couldn't get the word out fast enough. What happened to that girl? What happened to the version of me who once thought love could shape people into better things? I passed the corner where she had her first bicycle accident, scraped her knee, cried like the world had ended. I'd carried her all the way home that day. She held onto my neck so tight I couldn't breathe. She used to trust me with everything. When did that change? I reached my apartment building, water dripping from my sleeves, shoes squishing with every step. I climbed the stairs one at a time. Inside, the air was thick with that familiar smell. Lemon, cleaner, old paperbacks, and something slightly floral from the plug-in I hadn't replaced in months. I slipped off my shoes by the door, peeled off the wet cardigan, and stood still in the middle of the living room. The silence roared. I moved toward the shelf where I kept the old things, the parts of life that didn't quite fit anywhere but were too important to throw away. A storage box sat in the back corner. Plastic. Faded blue. Labeled in black marker. Home docs. Old. I pulled it down and sat on the floor, legs crossed like a schoolgirl, the box creaking as I opened it. Inside, water bills from a decade ago, insurance letters, my sister's hospital records, yellowing envelopes, the detritus of years of responsibility. I kept digging, fingers now shaking from something more than cold, and then I saw it. Folded in thirds, wrapped in a crinkled manila sleeve, heavy paper. The edges curled like dried leaves. I tugged it free and held it up to the lamp. Property deed. My name. In bold. Eleanor D. Carlisle. Sole title holder of parcel 732B, Lot 19. Lot 19. The land Amanda's house now sat on. I blinked. Read it again. No mention of transfer. No co-signers. No amendment. Just my name. Plain as day. I remembered now. The day I signed the house over to her, so she could build her fresh start. I'd given her the structure, not the soil beneath it. Somehow, I never filed the land transfer, or maybe I meant to and forgot. Or maybe I just wanted to keep one small piece of myself attached to that place, and I never told her. I thought she knew, or maybe she assumed. Maybe it never occurred to her to check. Either way, legally, she didn't own the land, and in real estate, land is everything. I stared at the paper for a long time, the weight of it in my hands, the texture of the old ink, the seal embossed at the bottom. It didn't feel like paper. It felt like possibility. For the first time since dinner, I smiled. It wasn't wide. It wasn't full of joy. But it was real. I didn't sleep that night. Not even a little. The deed lay unfolded on my kitchen table, lit by the low hum of the overhead light. I stared at it for hours, tracing the shape of my own signature. I remembered signing it, years ago, but only for the house, never the land. Amanda had been in such a rush back then. "We'll get it all squared away later," she'd said. She was always charming when she needed something, but that later never came. At sunrise, I slipped the paper into a plastic sleeve and tucked it into my bag. Then I called the only person I knew who'd tell me the truth. James Fuller, a retired paralegal I used to share coffee with at the library every Tuesday before his Parkinson's got bad. I hadn't seen him in months, but he picked up on the first ring. "Ellie?" His voice cracked. "Everything okay?" "I need to ask you something legal," I said, my voice tight. "Something important." His condo smelled like menthol rub and burned toast. The blinds were closed, but the TV was on, a silent court show flickering in the background. I laid the deed on his coffee table, smoothed the wrinkles out like it was a wounded thing. James squinted at it through his bifocals. No words for a while. Just the slow sound of paper shifting as he turned the document in his hands. "You're saying they built their home, their whole damn property, without transferring the title of the land?" he finally said. I nodded. He blinked. "Well, I'll be damned." He set the paper down and leaned back slowly. "You still own it, Ellie. Not just a little sliver. The entire parcel. Lot 19. Amanda and Brent might have the building, but that building is squatting on land that isn't theirs." I swallowed. "What does that mean? Legally?" He looked at me over the rim of his glasses. "It means you could evict them, take back the land, or charge them rent retroactively. Heck, you could force a sale of the house if you play it right. Depends on how dirty you're willing to get." My stomach tightened, but not with fear this time, with possibility. He reached for his tea, hands shaking only slightly. "They'd fight it, of course. Probably assume they can scare you off. But they'd be wrong. You've got a clean chain of ownership. I don't say this often, but Ellie, the law's on your side." Shockingly so, I sat back, breath shallow. All these years, I thought I'd given them everything. Turns out I'd kept the one piece that mattered. Maybe out of oversight, or maybe something deeper. Maybe part of me knew they'd never deserve it. James pulled out an old yellow notepad and started scribbling. "Let's draft a preliminary land reclaim notice," he said, clearing his throat. "You're not obligated to send it yet, but you'll feel better knowing it exists." He started reading clauses aloud, legalese thick on his tongue. I barely heard it, not because I didn't care, but because my brain was already racing ahead. Not in revenge, not yet, in control. For the first time in years, I wasn't at the mercy of their laughter. I wasn't waiting for a seat at their table. I was the one holding the floorboards they stood on. James stopped writing and looked up at me, his pen poised in midair. His tone shifted, softer now. "I know what you're thinking," he said, "and I won't judge either way. But let me ask you this." He leaned in. "Do you want revenge? Or do you want justice?" The first thing I did when I got home from James's condo was pour myself a cup of black coffee. No sugar, no cream. I needed the bitterness. I needed the clarity. I sat at my kitchen table with the deed in front of me and my reading glasses perched low on my nose. The air was still. My hands weren't shaking this time. They used to call me trash. Behind my back. Sometimes even to my face. "Trailer chic," Brent joked once. Amanda told me not to embarrass her by bringing my beat-up Ford to her bridal shower. For years, I believed them, that I was less, smaller, disposable. But here I was, with a document that said otherwise. Turns out I wasn't the guest. I was the landlord. I started quietly, methodically. I pulled out old tax statements, all in my name, still active. They'd been forwarding to my apartment this whole time, but I never really looked closely. I thought it was junk. I never noticed that Amanda and Brent weren't even paying for the dirt they built their kingdom on. The bills came to me. I paid them. And they laughed at me while eating off granite countertops bolted into my foundation. I took photos of every page, made copies, scanned everything into a USB I kept tucked in an old Altoids tin. I learned that trick from a librarian once. Hide the big things in small places. Next came the county clerk's office. I wore my cleanest shoes and brought a tote bag of carefully labeled folders. It took all of 20 minutes for the clerk to confirm the obvious. The land had never been legally transferred. "Looks like it's yours, Miss Carlyle," she said, peering at the monitor. "You thinking of selling?" "Not yet," I said. "I'm just getting reacquainted." Back home, I printed the official notice to vacate premises draft James had helped me write. It sat in my lap like a loaded weapon. Not sent yet, but ready. I paced for hours that night, staring at it. Should I warn Amanda first? Should I tell her gently, like a mother who still cared? Or should I let it fall on her like a thunderclap? She once told me kindness was weakness. Maybe she was right. I opened my laptop and instinctively, stupidly, clicked onto Brent's Facebook page. I wasn't friends with him, but his posts were public. Always had been. He liked the attention. The most recent one stopped me cold. A meme. Some cartoonish drawing of an old woman with sagging cheeks and a cane. The text read, "If your parents didn't give you a house, they failed. If your grandma still talks, she's overdue." Below it, Brent Thompson. "Can we just admit we should be allowed to euthanize toxic elders? Asking for a friend?" Laughing emojis. Dozens of them. Some from Amanda's friends. My breath caught, sharp and hot in my throat. Not just at the cruelty, but at how casually he posted it, as if people like me were punchlines, as if I didn't exist. He didn't know I was watching, but I was. I took a screenshot, saved it in a folder titled Evidence Public Conduct. I felt no rage, just a quiet click inside me, like a gear shifting into place. Then I opened my phone, and I called my lawyer. "Hello? James? It's Ellie. Something happen? Yes, I said calmly. It's time to serve them. For most of my life, power lived in other people's hands. The boss who scheduled me double shifts without asking. The school administrator who looked at Amanda like she was a charity case. The young men who used to snicker when I paid for groceries with quarters. Power was something I witnessed, never something I held. Until now. James greeted me at his door with a slow, satisfied smile, his cardigan buttoned unevenly and his glasses perched at an angle that made him look like a tired professor who never quite gave up the fight. "You're back," he said, stepping aside. "I said I would be," I replied. This time, I meant it. The coffee table was already cleared. Legal pads, county maps, and a manila envelope sat in a neat stack. But someone else was sitting on the sofa. A man, maybe late 20s, trim suit, tired eyes that said, "I've read worse cases, but not many like this." "This is Michael," James said. "He's a law associate from my old firm. Fresh out of Columbia. Hasn't learned how to quit yet." Michael stood and offered his hand. "Miss Carlyle, I've reviewed your situation, and let me say this up front. You have leverage most people would kill for." I raised an eyebrow. "And you're willing to help?" He nodded. "Pro bono. If you're ready to follow through, I'm in." My throat tightened slightly. For the first time in a long while, someone wasn't doing me a favor out of pity. They were standing beside me because I had something worth standing for. For the next few days, I did what I've always done best. I worked. Quietly. Relentlessly. While Amanda and Brent continued living their picture-perfect life, I filed paperwork. James guided me through the steps like an old general drafting battle plans. Michael compiled a case file that could bite. Property tax receipts, deed inconsistencies, and every bit of digital footprint Brent had ever posted that showed he believed he owned the land without verification. I kept my head down. Said nothing. No warning. No drama. Just silence. Until I was ready to make noise. Then came the video. It showed up on my neighbor. Charlene's phone first. She knocked on my door like her hand was on fire. "You need to see this," she said, breathless. She held out her phone, screen already playing. The footage was grainy but unmistakable. The dinner table? Amanda. Brent laughter echoing off the high ceilings. Me, frozen in the middle of it, staring at that bowl like it held poison. The caption read, "Dinner with Auntie Dumpster. Guess what's in her bowl? Fancy feast challenge." I watched in silence. Every second peeled back another layer of that night's humiliation. I could hear the sharpness in Brent's voice. I could see Amanda's camera tilt. She was filming me the entire time. Charlene looked like she wanted to cry. This isn't just mean. It's sick. The video had over 4,000 shares already. Mostly local. Mostly laughing. That was the moment something inside me, something old and slow-burning, went cold. Not rage, not grief. Certainty. I walked over to the printer and pulled out the signed notice James and I had finalized. My name sat at the bottom in ink, steady and sure. Enough waiting. Enough silence. That night, I called Michael. He picked up on the first ring. "I'm ready," I said. "We serve them first thing tomorrow." My hand hovered over the envelope, pen shaking slightly. But not from fear. From restraint. The letter in front of me wasn't angry. It wasn't theatrical. It was calculated. Cold. Written in black ink with margins measured to the millimeter. No emotion. No accusations. Just facts. Presented with surgical precision. To Amanda Carlyle and Brent Thompson, per County Parcel 732B, this notice serves as a formal declaration of ownership regarding the land located beneath your residence. I had read it aloud twice, then a third time in my head. The words felt heavier than they looked. Each line carried the weight of a decade's worth of swallowed pride and buried sacrifice. I capped the pen, slid the letter into a crisp white envelope. My fingers moved slowly, almost ceremonially. Then I stopped. It was after 9 p.m. when I pulled on my coat and stepped out into the cool evening air. The sky was clear. No wind. The kind of still night where sound travels farther than it should. My footsteps on the sidewalk felt loud. The envelope was in my coat pocket, pressing lightly against my side with every step, like it was pulsing. When I reached the edge of their neighborhood, I hesitated. Not because I doubted myself, but because I wanted to be sure. Not angry, not impulsive. Just sure. Their house was lit up like always. Every window a soft, warm glow, the kind of brightness that tries too hard to say nothing bad ever happens here. I stood across the street, partially hidden behind the low hedges near the mailbox, and then I saw her, Amanda, through the kitchen window. She was sitting on one of those high stools, barefoot, swirling a glass of white wine. Brent was leaning against the counter, scrolling on his phone. A few other people I didn't recognize were there, maybe coworkers or neighbors. Everyone had wine. Everyone was laughing. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. Amanda raised her hand mid-story, mimicking my posture from that dinner night. Shoulders slumped, mouth half open. She wobbled her head like a caricature. Brent doubled over laughing. One of the guests mimed gagging. Laughter exploded again. I stood perfectly still, my breath visible in the cool night air. They weren't just telling the story, they were reliving it, replaying my humiliation for sport. And just like that, I knew. This wasn't about misunderstanding, or miscommunication, or even cruelty. It was about power. They thought I didn't have any. I turned and walked home slowly, the envelope still untouched in my pocket. When I got back, I pulled it out, tore it open, and laid the letter flat again. I added 2 more sentences at the bottom. Simple, lawful, indisputable. Failure to vacate within 30 days will result in a formal filing with the county court. This is not a negotiation. Then I typed a new subject line for the email attachment. Notice to vacate, parcel 732B. I printed 2 copies. I folded them neatly, each crease sharp and final. I slipped one into a new envelope and sealed it. The glue stuck instantly. It felt like closing a vault. I addressed it by hand, each letter neat and steady. Amanda Carlisle and Brent Thompson, 17 Deer Hollow Lane, Stonebridge, Pennsylvania. I held it up to the light. It looked like any other envelope, but it wasn't. It was the beginning of the end. The internet is a mirror. It reflects what people want to be seen, the best vacations, the filtered smiles, the subtle digs disguised as humor. And sometimes, just sometimes, it reflects their mistakes. I wasn't looking for it. I swear I wasn't. I only logged on to check tracking for the certified letter I'd mailed that morning, but the algorithm had other plans. Right at the top of my feed, highlighted in smug blue and white, Amanda Carlisle updated her status. The post had already gathered 98 likes, 32 laughing emojis, and a growing thread of condescending comments. Her words read like honey laced with arsenic. Just a friendly reminder to all those entitled relatives out there. If you gave something away, it's not yours anymore. That's how gifts work. And for the record, some of us own the dirt the drama crawled out of. Land queens, generational drama, Shaw, not my problem. I felt the blood rush to my face, not in shame, but in razor-edged focus. This wasn't just arrogance, it was admission, but that wasn't the part that changed everything. It was the photo she included beneath it, a casually staged shot of her kitchen counter. At first glance, it looked like nothing. A cup of green juice, her manicured hand holding her phone, a pile of unopened mail just off to the side. But then I saw it. peeking out from the top of the stack. The edge of an envelope. Manila. Large. With a red stamp in the corner. My envelope. The certified notice. I zoomed in, squinting so hard my eyes burned. Clear as day, the corner of the envelope bore the county clerk's return address. The date stamp on the post matched the one on my tracking history. The same day delivery was confirmed. I didn't move. I just stared at the screen, the thrum of realization building in my chest like a drumbeat. She had received it. She knew. And she posted this after. That meant any future claims she might try, that she hadn't been warned, that she was blindsided, that she thought the land was hers, were officially dead in the water. She didn't just ignore the letter. She mocked it in public. I clicked Save Post and downloaded the image. Then I took screenshots. The post, the timestamp, the comment thread, even her caption. I created a folder titled Exhibit A and dumped them all in. My hands didn't shake. They moved like I'd done this before, like this moment had been waiting for me all along. I called Michael. He picked up sounding distracted. Ellie? Everything okay? I have proof, I said. She received the notice. She posted about it, mocked it, and there's a photo. There was silence on the line. Then, wait. Seriously? She even hashtagged it. Own the dirt. A pause. Then a laugh. Not joyful. Disbelieving. Ellie, this changes everything. We're no longer walking into court as a quiet land dispute. This is now deliberate, willful noncompliance. And that post? It's evidence, I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. So, what now? Michael's voice sharpened with professional precision. Now? We serve them. Formally. No more letters, no more hints. It's time I walked over to the printer, loaded the fresh documents Michael had just emailed over, and watched as the pages came out one by one, each one heavier than the last, like the sound of a gavel dropping. The final notice. It was no longer just about land. Now it was about accountability. I slipped the pages into a thick envelope, wrote their names cleanly across the front. No emotion, no flourishes, just clarity. I wore black. Not for mourning, for message. A clean pressed blazer, pearl earrings, and a pair of sensible flats. No frills, no apologies, just business. Michael pulled up outside my apartment in his gray sedan at 10 a.m. sharp, the manila envelope already sitting on the dashboard like a loaded gun. You sure you want to be there for the handoff? He asked as we buckled in. I'm not missing this, I said, my voice flat. I watched them serve me humiliation on a silver platter. They can take this the same way. The mansion looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I had just grown in all the places they'd once tried to shrink me. The front lawn was manicured, almost artificial in its perfection. A few luxury cars lined the driveway. Guess again. Brunch, maybe. Amanda never did suffer in silence. We walked to the front door. Michael carried the envelope. I carried something else. A small gift bag, white and unassuming. He rang the bell. Footsteps padded across marble. And then, Amanda opened the door. She blinked twice, confused at first. Her smile was automatic, performative. Then her eyes met mine, and it froze. Behind her, Brent's voice echoed. Babe, who is... He appeared in the hallway, holding a glass of orange juice, wearing a button-down shirt and the kind of smirk I used to mistake for charm. Until he saw Michael. Then he stopped cold. Michael pulled the envelope from his jacket. Amanda Carlisle, Brent Thompson. This is your official notice to vacate the premises at 17 Deer Hollow Lane. Pursuant to Pennsylvania Property Code and the ownership deed held by Ms. Eleanor Carlisle, you are occupying private land without legal right. Amanda's hand flew to her mouth. Brent dropped his glass. It shattered across the marble, spraying juice and shards across the floor. You've got to be kidding me, he barked, stepping forward. You think you can just show up here and throw us out? No, I said calmly, stepping past Michael. I know I can. Brent looked like he was about to charge, but Amanda stopped him with a touch to his arm. Her face had gone pale, lips tight. You can't do this, she whispered. We live here. This is our home, built on someone else's land, Michael said. Who warned you? In writing. And who you mocked? In public. You ignored a formal notice. This is the consequence. A silence settled, tense, trembling. From inside the house, one of Amanda's friends peeked around the corner. Another stood by the stairwell, awkwardly pretending to check her phone. The walls weren't just watching, they were listening. I reached into the gift bag and pulled out a small square box. Simple. No ribbon. I held it out to Amanda, my expression unreadable. She hesitated, then took it. Inside, a single can of Fancy Feast, chicken and liver flavor. Her fingers trembled as she looked up at me. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just said, return the favor. Brent lost it. You're pathetic, he shouted, pointing a shaking finger in my face. You think this is gonna end with some envelope and a damn cat can? We'll fight this. You think we don't have lawyers? Michael stepped forward, calm and composed. Please do, he said. We welcome it. Discovery will be fascinating. Brent's mouth opened again, but no words came out. Just rage, vibrating in his throat with nowhere to go. Amanda stood frozen, still holding the box like it might bite. I turned to leave. Slowly, deliberately. Michael followed. The wind had picked up by the time we reached the sidewalk. Leaves spun in quiet circles. Somewhere down the street, a lawn sprinkler clicked to life. In the car, neither of us spoke for a moment. Then Michael said, Well, that was theatrical. I stared straight ahead. That wasn't the performance, I said. That was the warning shot. 2 weeks. That's all it took for the smugness to vanish, for Amanda's wine-soaked world to crack down the middle and bleed panic. 2 weeks after serving them, their lawyer called me. At first, the message was polite, civil, a misunderstanding they hoped to resolve quickly, perhaps a small settlement, enough to keep the matter out of court. There's no need to ruin family ties over paperwork, the email said. I didn't reply. 3 days later, a second message came, this one from Brent himself, via a hastily written email. Subject, let's be reasonable. The body of the message was anything but. Brent offered me $10,000 to walk away quietly, claiming Amanda had been emotionally manipulated and that I was clearly holding on to resentment. He warned me that dragging this out would only embarrass everyone. I forwarded the email to Michael without a word. He replied 5 minutes later, They're cracking. Let them. By the end of that week, Brent's business partners had caught wind of the eviction, a small real estate firm built on prestige, polish, and perfect PR. I didn't leak it, but someone did. Maybe one of their brunch guests. Maybe karma in Wi-Fi form. All I know is the whispers spread fast, and suddenly Brent's LinkedIn page was quiet. One partner removed him from the About Us section. Another unfollowed Amanda entirely on social media. The couple who once mocked me on camera were now frantically managing their image, just as their house, their foundation, their precious aesthetic empire, sat on top of my land like a rotting cherry on a stolen cake. Amanda's next message wasn't smug, it was tearful. She called me directly. A voicemail, shaky and pleading. Ellie, please. We messed up, okay? I get it. But don't take our home. We'll make it right. Just don't go to court. I can't. Brent can't. It'll destroy everything. She sounded like a child again. For a flicker of a second, my heart bent. But it didn't break. I called Michael. Let's offer mediation, I said. Terms? He asked. My table, I replied. My rules. The mediation took place in a neutral law office. Beige walls, uncomfortable chairs, and a clock that ticked like a judge's gavel. Michael sat beside me, cool and quiet. Amanda and Brent entered 10 minutes late, looking like people who hadn't slept. Brent's jaw clenched like he had to chew every word before swallowing his pride. Amanda looked everywhere but at me. I leaned forward. My terms are simple, I said. You sign over the house. No fight, no tricks, no fake delays. Brent started to object. We've poured everything into that home. And you built it on stolen ground. I cut in. Calm. Final. Amanda's eyes glistened, and for the first time, I saw it. Not just shame. Recognition. Of what she'd done. Of who I really was. Of everything she'd ignored for years. Conveniently. There's more, I added. They both looked up. I want a written apology. Signed. Stating the truth. That you knowingly mocked and humiliated the person who raised you, and that you disrespected the terms of property transfer. I don't want a public statement. Just a paper I can frame or burn. Michael didn't flinch. Amanda didn't speak. Brent looked like he might explode, but his hand stayed still. Then Amanda said quietly, "Okay." The papers were signed 2 days later. The house was mine. But that wasn't the ending. Because revenge, I was learning, doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like silence. Like sitting in your own chair, in your own kitchen, knowing no one can take it from you again. The house was empty when I stepped inside. Not just vacant. Hollow. As if it had exhaled the last of Amanda and Brent's presence and didn't miss them. There were no lingering scents of overcooked rosemary chicken or expensive candle wax. Just quiet. Pure, uninterrupted quiet. And after everything, that was what struck me most. Not the victory. Not the title papers now tucked safely in my purse. But the silence. Amanda and Brent had left in a rush, probably in shame. Their social circle had collapsed like wet cardboard after the mediation. Word had spread, not from me, but through the invisible, unstoppable channels that punishment prefers. Their brunch friends went dark. Real estate partners dissolved connections. Brent's sleek Audi had disappeared from the driveway days ago. Now the garage echoed with emptiness. Amanda hadn't even taken her "home is where the wine is" wall plaque. Fitting. I walked through each room slowly, deliberately, like I was meeting the space for the first time instead of reclaiming it. The floors had been redone in clean oak. The furniture was modern, all glass and metal, cold, impersonal. But it didn't matter. I wasn't here for decor. I was here for something deeper, something rooted. In the kitchen, I paused. Same island, same counter stools, same polished marble surface where the joke had happened. The place where they'd served me a bowl meant to shame, not feed. The scene of their laughter. But now, it was mine. And it was quiet. I opened the cabinets. Everything perfectly labeled, arranged. Their perfectionism had always masked their insecurity. I saw that now. I placed a pan on the stove, turned the burner on low, and began to cook. Not out of hunger, out of reclamation. I made what I always made when I wanted to feel safe. Slow scrambled eggs, buttered sourdough toast, and a side of sautéed spinach with a hint of garlic. Nothing fancy, nothing showy, but warm, real. The sizzle of the skillet, the smell of browning bread, the rhythm of a wooden spoon against metal. All of it calmed me more than any courtroom victory ever could. When the food was done, I set the plate on the same table where I had once sat surrounded by people who called me family, yet treated me like a prop for their cruelty. But tonight, I sat alone. No camera phones, no laughter, just the sound of my fork sliding across ceramic. That's when I saw it, tucked in the far end of the silverware drawer, almost like it had been waiting. The same fork. I knew it by the tiny chip on the handle, the one I'd held that night when I sat still, holding back tears, pretending not to know what they'd done. I picked it up now, held it differently, firmly, not as a guest, not as a victim, but as the owner of every tile beneath my feet. I took a bite of my eggs, buttery, hot, perfect. And in the silence, I smiled. Not because it tasted good, because no one could ever serve me shame here again. I held onto the fork for a few more days. Sometimes I'd catch myself staring at it in the kitchen drawer, remembering how heavy it had felt that night. Not in weight, but in silence, in humiliation. But now it held something else. Power. And closure. I didn't plan to stay in the house forever. It was never about square footage or zip codes. It was about reclaiming the space they once weaponized against me. And once that was done, I realized something. I didn't need it anymore. So, I listed it. The market was hot, the location ideal, and within 3 weeks, a young couple with a new baby had made a full-price offer. They loved the open layout, the garden, the kitchen island. They had no idea what the house had witnessed. I didn't tell them. Some ghosts are meant to stay buried. After the sale closed, I took a portion of the money and walked into a small community bank near my apartment. I sat down with a teller named Ron, who had kind eyes and didn't rush me when I explained what I wanted. "I want to open a foundation," I said. "Something small. Quiet, but permanent." He nodded, listening. "I want it to help people like me, elders who've been humiliated, abandoned, taken advantage of by their own. I want them to have somewhere to turn, even if it's just a ride to court or someone to explain a form." He smiled. "We can make that happen." We named it the Second Fork Fund, and I kept the real one, the fork, in a small shadow box on my new bookshelf. The story might have ended there, but stories, I've learned, have strange ways of continuing when you least expect it. A local journalist had covered the legal case, just a short piece in the community section, titled, "Senior Wins Land Dispute in Poetic Turn of Tables." I didn't think much of it until the emails started coming in. Dozens, then hundreds. Messages from strangers, some young, some old, who had seen a piece of themselves in my story. People who had been laughed at, dismissed, used. People who had survived betrayal by those they once loved. Some just wrote, "Thank you. You reminded me I'm not crazy." Others wrote pages. Stories of being forced out of family homes, of manipulation hidden behind smiles, of standing up and being called bitter instead of brave. I read every word. I replied to as many as I could. And then, one morning, I got a letter. Not an email, a real envelope, handwritten and neat. The return address stopped me cold. Boyd Riley, my sister's son, Amanda's cousin. I hadn't seen him in nearly 2 decades. Inside was a short note. "Aunt Ellie, I saw the article. I'm sorry for how long it's been. You were always kind to me, and I should have stayed in touch. I'd love to visit if you'd have me." For a long moment, I just sat there holding the letter, the way you hold something fragile that somehow survived a storm. Boyd came the next weekend. We met at a diner, ordered coffee, and talked like time hadn't splintered between us. He remembered things I'd forgotten. How I used to keep a jar of butterscotch candies on the TV stand. How I taught him to write in cursive with a broken pencil. He'd grown into a quiet, thoughtful man. Married, no kids yet, but kind. Solid. When he hugged me goodbye, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Rooted. Back home, I stood in the kitchen. Not the one they built, but the one I chose. My apartment was small again. Cozy. Smelling faintly of lavender and lemon oil. I'd made myself another plate of eggs, toast, and spinach. The same comfort meal that had once helped me reclaim the silence. I used a different fork this time. The special one stayed in its box. I didn't need it anymore to remind me of what I'd survived. I had something better now.